Welcome to Get Naked with Dr. Kate. I'm your host, Dr. Kate Balestrieri, a Beverly Hills-based psychologist, certified sex therapist, and the founder of Modern Intimacy. Thanks for joining me here where I talk about sex, relationships, mental health, and dive into your questions with practical answers and real solutions. Each week, I share insights aimed at helping you build an authentic and healthy relationship with yourself, with others, and with your sexuality. It's time to get naked, emotionally, mentally, and on your own time, physically. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Get Naked with Dr. Kate podcast. I'm Dr. Kate Balestrieri, and today I'm going to be answering some of the questions that you all have been sending in. And I want to say thank you. I'm so glad that you're here and that you've subscribed and you're listening to the podcast. If you feel like this podcast is something that has been inspiring or interesting or has helped you in some way, please feel free to leave a 5-star review on any of the podcast channels where you get your podcasts. It helps this podcast amplify and reach more people who might also be helped by what we talk about here. So I've got a couple of really exciting questions coming up. And a quick reminder, if you are not subscribed to our newsletter, go to modernintimacy.com and you can sign up for our free newsletter to get recaps about the podcast and different blogs, different deals on products that we recommend, and lots of tips and things to think about throughout the week. The last little update before we jump into questions is that over the weekend, a few weekends ago, I went to a training retreat to learn how to incorporate psychedelics into therapy. And I'm not ready to talk about it yet, but in the coming episodes and in the coming months, stay tuned for more conversation about how psychedelics might be incorporated into my practice and specifically into the field of sex therapy. There's a lot of really interesting research going on right now, and I am so excited to launch some different programming next year. And I would love to get your thoughts on it. So if you have questions about psychedelics and you want me to answer them in a future episode, send your questions to question@getnakedpodcast.com, and I'll be sure to include them in the research that I'm doing. Okay, so let's jump into some questions. I'm going to try to go through 3 today. And the first one says, I would love an episode revolving around your career and how you got to where you are today. I'm majoring in psychology, and it would be extremely helpful to know the steps you took to get where you are. I absolutely love your podcast. What is my path into this work? And I'm so grateful for this question. It is a question that I get asked a lot because there's not a lot of education about how to become a sex therapist out there. In fact, becoming a sex therapist is maybe one of the more challenging certifications to get into because sexuality as a whole is something that's not really addressed in graduate level training. So my path is this. It was kind of an indirect and circuitous path into this part of the work. When I first got started as a young human, this was actually not my field. So psychology is a second career for me. I used to be in the field of selling employee benefit plans and working with employers to put together packages for health insurance, dental insurance, life insurance, all those kinds of things. But I really just needed something that was a little bit more artful, had a little bit more soul, and would allow me to stay endlessly curious. So the 25-year-old version of me who decided to go to grad school would have laughed in your face if you would have said, wow, eventually you're going to be a sex therapist. Because at the time that I went back into grad school, I really thought that I would stay in the world of forensic psychology forever. So forensic psychology is the practice of psychology wherever it intersects with the legal system in some way. So that has a lot of different applications. And for me, the initial place where I started was working in correctional settings, primarily with sexually violent persons. I've worked with people from all different demographic backgrounds who were incarcerated for various reasons. But the biggest part of my work was working with people who'd been convicted of sexual violence and related crimes. So for a long time, I did evaluations and treatment for sex offenders and then also for non-sexually violent offenders, and was really trying to help them understand how they got where they were and how to minimize recidivism if they were to be released. And I worked in various prison settings for on and off for about 10 years. And about halfway through that path, I started to feel really burnt out by the system of privatized prisons and just how under-resourced and overburdened those systems are, not to mention all of the incredibly inhumane things that were going on, despite legislation and practices to try and prevent those things from happening. So I took a pause and decided to go into private practice. And at that point, it was a really easy transition for me to talk with people about sexuality and about their relationships because I'd already been doing that for so many years. Not every therapist receives extra training or feels comfortable talking to people about sex. But working with sex offenders helped me understand just how little education there really is. That's good and sound information about sex out there. And I really saw that as a huge deficit and a contributing factor to why some folks committed the sexual offenses that they did. So when I started working in private practice, I was referred a lot of clients who had something going on with regard to their relationship with sex. Sometimes it was a secondary issue to something like a substance abuse problem or early childhood trauma. And sometimes it was more of a primary issue. They were feeling really confused about compulsive behavior they were exhibiting, or they were struggling to feel really sexually empowered after surviving sexual violence. So my work in private practice really continued to grow and blossom in that way. And at that point, I moved from Illinois to California and started really focusing on helping folks who were struggling with problematic sexual behavior or compulsive sexual behavior, usually in concert with some sort of substance abuse or other behavioral addiction. So I did a lot of work around that for a while and then eventually decided to pursue certification as a sex addiction therapist. And while that was amazing training, I still felt like something was missing for me in my own understanding of sexuality and how sex and mental health really intersect and overlap. So I pursued certification as a sex therapist. Now, my certification is maintained through AASECT. That's short for the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. There are several credentialing boards for sex therapists, but AASECT is usually the one that is best known and more widely known throughout not only just America, but throughout the world. So I decided to pursue that certification, and what it consists of is a lot. So to become a certified sex therapist, you not only have to be a licensed mental health professional of some sort in the state where you practice, but then you also have to go for an additional 90 CEs or 90 credit hours of additional training focused on sexuality and working with sexuality and mental health. And on top of that, it's about 50 hours of additional supervision that's required and no less than a year and a half, so 18 months worth of time. So a lot of folks are deterred by how long it takes to become a sex therapist, but it's for good reason. Working with people around sexuality is probably the most delicate and shame-based part of our psyches because of all the sex negativity that exists in our world. So when we think about how vulnerable folks are in that space, it's important to have extra training around the ethics of practice. It's important to have extra knowledge about how to incorporate sex and sexuality into the bigger picture of who someone is. And it requires extra sensitivity to things like privilege and biases. And so sex therapists are really well trained in understanding their own biases. And the last major component of becoming a sex therapist is going through what's called a SAR, or a sexual attitude reassignment workshop. And these are usually experiential, and they are all about challenging the biases that we have about sex. So sex therapists do these things to stay really up on what is ethically best practice and what is going to help people challenge the shame and the biases that they have in their own lives. So that's been my path, and I've had a private practice. I've owned other group practices, but currently I own a group practice called Modern Intimacy, and you can visit modernintimacy.com to learn more about it, but it's really wonderful. My team is fantastic. I've got about 13 folks currently on staff, and we are licensed in 5 different states currently, and we will soon be in 7 states. So we are in New York, we're in Florida, Illinois, Colorado, California, and very soon Minnesota and Texas as well. And we continue to expand. For people who live outside of those jurisdictions, we have 2 really amazing coaches on our team who can work with folks internationally, and one who is bilingual and can work with folks in English and Spanish. We also have 2 externs who recently started with us, and it's really such a privilege to work with externs. So Modern Intimacy, my practice, has a contract with the University of Miami, and we serve as a training site for their second-year graduate level students in their master's program. What that means basically is that these are people finishing their 2-year master's degree, and they want to learn how to become therapists. So they go to a training site, and those training sites teach them how to become a therapist. But finding a sex therapy practice to get specialized training in as a practicum student is really kind of unique because there just aren't as many practices doing this for various reasons. So I feel really fortunate that we've been able to work with the University of Miami, and we have our second cohort of students in place. They go through rigorous training, and they are supervised not only by me, but by other folks on our team who have been in practice for a long time. And it's really great. It helps us all stay fresh in our forever student mentality, helps us stay humble and staying curious about what's going on in all of the trending research. And then it also gives students a place to really get sharp focus in the area where they want to practice. But the best part is that it allows Modern Intimacy to offer low-cost or no-cost therapy services to people who maybe can't afford to work with a specialist like myself. So it's really awesome for folks who are in the states that I listed. If access to care has felt really elusive, we can help. So feel free to reach out and work with one of our students. Thanks so much for the question. I appreciate being able to share a little bit more about myself and my path in this work. And I hope that it's helpful for you as you think about how to pursue your own path. After grad school, more training is necessary, but finding those schools that offer sex therapy training programs can help you work and get trained at the same time. And for what it's worth, I'm so glad I did this. I can't imagine doing anything else in this world professionally. So let's move on to our next question. Okay, so this question came in from someone on Instagram, and we had a little bit of back and forth in the DMs about kind of what was going on, and she's given me full permission to share any part of this conversation because it's something that comes up quite a bit, and I think it's a point of contention that really can be painful for partners. So this person writes, "My husband just surprise gifted me with a vibrator. A rush of truly awful emotions came over me, and I'm half devastated and half furious. As a survivor of sexual assault, I'm beyond disappointed in this, quote, gift." So she asks, is it ever a good idea to surprise your partner with a sex toy? Should you have a conversation before ever doing something like this? And what message could you be sending your partner with a, quote, gift like this? And is there a way to repair if your partner dislikes the gift? She went on to say that when she received the gift, She felt like he was trying to, quote, fix her waning libido for him. She felt like he was trying to shortcut a way to better sex or more sex with her. And she told him that it felt similar to a partner giving a gym membership to a spouse who's struggling with their weight. It felt like criticism and judgment at the same time. It felt like it was her problem to work out or fix, and he would be the beneficiary of her efforts in that area. Oh, so there's so much to unpack in this question. And I want to start by saying, one, intentions and impact are really different, and we cannot guarantee that our intentions with our partner will be felt in the way that we hope it is. So it is a really good practice if you're trying to think about ways to spice things up or change the dynamic when there's a noted desire discrepancy. I've heard so many different reasons why people would buy their partner a gift like that out of nowhere. And when it doesn't land, it doesn't land. And it doesn't mean that you're a bad person for buying the gift, but it does give you an opportunity to open up a different kind of listening, because sex is so sensitive. And if somebody is the survivor of sexual assault or sexual abuse, it's very likely that there's a higher potential that they will feel like they're being used for sex in other areas of their lives. Even if they know that that's not true consciously, even if that's not the dynamic that you've had established between yourselves. When something feels off and their partner's not being really explicit about how they want to solve the problem with them for the benefit of both of them, it can definitely feel like this person said, like it's her problem to fix or work out, and he's the beneficiary of it. And look, when we look at the track record of heterosexual relationships, there often is a sexual double standard or a tremendous amount of sexual emotional labor that is put on the shoulders of the female partner to be available, to be interested, and there can be an entitlement that may not even be experienced as conscious entitlement by the man, but definitely can be felt that way, consciously and unconsciously, by the female partner. Now, every relationship is different, and I don't mean to paint anybody with a broad brush. So if this doesn't fit for you, that's okay. It's not meant for you. But if it does, and you and your partner have been struggling with desire discrepancy for a while, or a mismatch in your libido, or you just can't get on the same page, buying a sex toy or throwing a new lube at the situation or getting some new lingerie is not going to be a fix if there are other holes in the boat of your relationship. And I think that's the piece to really look at if your intention falls flat in any of your efforts. That's a great opportunity to say, oh, wow, this is bigger than I thought it was, and my partner and I have some repair to do. And it may or may not be related to the gift, but the gift may open up just a lot more awareness about what else isn't aligned for your partner. Desire is a tricky thing, and when you factor in things like domestic labor, emotional labor, mental load, healing from sexual trauma, which is not really a finite experience, right? That healing journey can ebb and flow over the course of someone's lifetime. So all of these things together, resentment in a relationship, changing hormones in a body, diet and exercise, everything can play a role in desire and how available desire is. So I would highly encourage this couple, if you're listening, to sit with an open mind with each other, have a conversation about the things that are getting in the way of your desire for one another without judgment, right? Really sit down and try to get clear on all the things that are slowing down your body's yes. And maybe a toy is something that you can incorporate into the process later, but it sounds like with this couple, there's more that's going on underneath the surface that could be explored and would help them cultivate a sex life that really feels equitable and like pleasure is for both of them, and their efforts to restore pleasure together are equally matched. All right, let's go over the last main question. This person is a cishet man, and he writes, when you're sexually frustrated because you have a hunger for stimulation and it starts to ruin your mood, what is an honest but not rude way to open up communication? Oh, this is a great question and such a nice dovetail from the previous question. So if we're talking a lot about desire discrepancies today, and if you have a bigger craving for sex than your partner and you want it more than they do, it's super important to talk about the impact on you without guilting your partner and without trying to shame them or coerce them or manipulate them into being sexual with you. That's going to just engender a whole bunch of resentment, and it will further the desire discrepancy between the two of you. So I love that you're asking this question in earnest so that you can get your needs met too. So opening up this conversation, I think first it's really important to set a time for the conversation and set some sort of expectations about what you hope to talk about, not an outcome, but what you hope to talk about. So that could sound something like, hey, I'd really love to talk about our sex life together. I have some things that I'd love to share with you, and I'm wondering when's a good time. I'm free at this time or this time, right? Give your partner some options so that they can mentally prepare for it. They know that you're not leaving as a result. Don't threaten the relationship, but just kind of say like, hey, I want to recalibrate our sex life and just talk a little bit about what's on my mind. And when you are in the conversation, it's really important to be reassuring with your partner. So again, let them know that you're not running out the door because you're not happy, but rather you're opening up a conversation so the two of you can brainstorm solutions together. When partners feel like they're the one holding up any kind of sex, it can put them on the defense, understandably, because it's hard to generate desire and arousal when you're just not in that headspace or when your body is saying no for other reasons. So one of the things that I like to have couples do in this situation is brainstorm different solutions together. You don't have to like all the solutions, but brainstorm as many as you can. Put them all out on the table, and then you can go through the pros and the cons together. So that could look like maybe offering to schedule sex. It might look like trying to remove some of the impediments that are on your partner's side of the street, right? Is your partner doing an unequal or overwhelming amount of work right now in the home, out of the home? Are there things that you can help your partner do? One, because you're together and that's what partners do, they help each other, but also because you recognize that maybe they don't have the bandwidth to really be sexual for themselves, not just with you so that you get the benefit of that. So that could look like getting creative together and maybe changing the way you address your schedule so that you have more time to be intimate together, not just sexually, but in general. So do you eat dinner together? Do you have other leisurely activities that you do together to set the stage for sexual tension and intimacy? Talk with your partner about what kind of individual activities you both have going on that you bring back to each other and are able to cultivate some texture and some desire around. And if you're really feeling like you're already doing all of those things and your desire is higher, then it's a great time to start talking about what are your fidelity agreements and what are some of the ways that your partner might be open to you exploring solo sex or partnered sex outside of the dynamic that you have. Now, for some folks in monogamous relationships, that immediately sends up a lot of bristles, and I get that. This isn't for everyone. At the same time, thinking about how you can cultivate excitement with each other so that your partner can remain sexually satisfied with or without you is a really important part of negotiating fidelity agreements that work for you both. So I'm not saying that you should be having sex with other people, but you might think about, can you create erotica together? And then your partner can use that erotica to engage in solo sex. in a way that still involves you or involves something that you have done together. How do you feel about your partner engaging in porn? Maybe they're watching it, they're listening to it, they're reading it, and then bringing some of their sexual fantasies to you to talk about later, whether or not you ever participate in them. Some folks are open to the idea of engaging in sex with other people, having their partner engage in sex with other people. If that's something that's okay for the both of you, then you can talk about what you need from each other in terms of boundaries so that you can feel really safe and protective of your partnership. The onus is on both of you to come up with solutions that you both feel really good about and that at the end of the day, protect your partnership. That's the goal. If you're trying to stay together, if you love each other, if you want to be in this partnership, both of you have an opportunity to negotiate for a win-win, right? So maybe that looks like scheduling more sex. Maybe it looks like broadening the dimensions of your monogamy. The possibilities are endless, and only the two of you can decide together what makes the most sense for you. But definitely talking about the impact of not having the kind of sex that you want is necessary in a kind way so that you can get closer to a dynamic that does work for you both and is sustainable. It's also not fair to ask one partner to go without the kind of sex that is satisfying for them. The last thing that I'll add is that if you're the sexually frustrated partner and you're hungry for stimulation, I might invite you to think about what else is coming up for you that sex might be solving. Are you aroused? Are you feeling desire? Or are you anxious about something? Are you bored? Are you angry? And you're looking at sex as a way to regulate your emotions. There's nothing wrong with that if that's what you're doing. But if that's what you're doing, I wonder if there are other ways to cultivate connection with your partner or regulate your emotions that might address the same thing. And really the last question that I'll ask you is, are you trying to achieve something else through sex with your partner? Are you trying to develop closeness or intimacy or an emotional connection? For many cishet men, sex is the path to feeling connected to a partner. And for many cishet women, emotional connection is necessary to feel sexually interested and feel desire. So these things are not necessarily biological truths, but because of the way we're conditioned, we're often, having different timing around these needs, and that's where the source of a lot of conflict can come up for partners. So think about if connection is what you're seeking in addition to or instead of sexual stimulation, and maybe there are other ways that you can engender that closeness that don't require sex when your partner isn't really in the mood for it. So I hope that's helpful and helps you get started with some kind of solution for both of you. That wraps up our questions for today. Thank you so much for sending them in and for reaching out. I couldn't do this without you. If you have questions that are applicable to you and your sex life or your relationships, don't forget to email them to question@getnakedpodcast.com. And a couple of other fun, exciting announcements. We have a new workshop that's starting September 19th. It is a 6-week workshop called Righteous Rage. This group is going to be all about taking pleasure back into your own hands and really understanding the rage that comes up with living in a patriarchal society, especially as we are seeing all kinds of legislation being passed, legislating the bodies of people born AFAB. So this group is great. It's going to be from 6 to 7:30 on Tuesdays. You can check it out on our website, modernintimacy.com, or email info@modernintimacy.com if you want us to send you the link and more information. Stay tuned for future episodes. I've got a bunch of great ones coming up. Future episodes, I've got Tatiana Vogt, the host of the Bedside Podcast, coming back. Dr. Alexandra Solomon coming back. We're talking about her new book. It's a great conversation. Dan Savage is going to join me in a few weeks to talk about sex and relationships and the state of sex in America. And Sarah Cooper is going to join me. You may know Sarah from her infamous impressions of Donald Trump, and she and I will be talking about her new book, Foolish. So stay tuned, subscribe. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to Get Naked with Dr. Kate. Stay connected with me on Instagram and TikTok at Dr. Kate Balestrieri. Everyone has questions, and I want to answer as many as I can. So feel free to email your questions to question@getnakedpodcast.com. If you're looking for a free 30-minute consultation with me or someone on my team, visit modernintimacy.com. And don't forget to join our newsletter, Modern Intimacy, on Substack. Let's meet back here next week. A new episode drops every Tuesday. Disclaimer, this podcast is not a substitute for therapy and does not constitute a professional relationship with Dr. Kate Balestrieri or Modern Intimacy. This podcast is strictly for education and entertainment purposes only.